All right, should we go ahead and get started? I'll just go ahead and get kicked off.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so today's primary focus is on supplements. Some of the content that we'll cover as well today will help also as you're thinking through the common application essay and what you're trying to do there, as well as like the University of California personal insight questions, which is something that some of the students or some people on the call may be working on in November. As we get closer to that specific deadline. But our goal here is to focus on the most common supplements that students have to write. What are the general structures, general strategies to pursue as we're actually thinking through those types of essays and content. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just a little bit about me, the company. So I'm one of the founders of a company called Prompt. We work with more students on more admissions essays than any other company in the world that we know of. And basically we review hundreds of essays a day and work with thousands and thousands of students a year to provide feedback on essays. So we're headed into actually our busiest week of the year. We're reviewing hundreds of essays a day right now. But what's fun is with that is that our writing coaches are getting everything turned around fairly quickly and providing really good detailed feedback on everything that students are writing. So without any further ado, what we're going to do is we'll get kicked off today. As I said, I'll share my screen. We have some awesome content to share. We have a couple of examples of essays to look at that will actually talk about like common first drafts of essays that we see. And we'll talk about like how do we actually go about improving them? How do we think about doing that? Which is kind of gives you a flavor of what we do as my team of our 175 plus essay coaches, as well as gives you an idea of how to actually work for the parents that are on the phone, how to actually work with your students on their essays as you're redoing them. All right. So just to get things kicked off, we actually are running this really cool raffle right now. And so for everybody that's on this webinar, you have until the end of day tomorrow to create your account at prompt.com/road to college. And everybody that creates their account, if you're new to us, creating your account by the end of day tomorrow, we are giving away at random, so that's why it's a raffle, 3 free reviews of essays. Okay, so if you create your account, then on Saturday morning, we'll notify the people that actually won a free review. And so you'll get an essay review, what we call an essay review credit, put into your system. And then you can get a free review of one of your essays, such as your common application essay. But for everybody else, it kind of gives you a sense of like how the system works. And actually we do have some really cool, valuable things that we provide for free, such as this really cool essay list tool. So we actually have a database of every single essay requirement for every single school. And what you do is you just add your schools to the list and show you all of the essays that you can write, including all the optional essays that you can write for a given school. And we highly recommend doing that because we often find that students do not necessarily spot or see all of the supplemental essays that they're supposed to write within an application until sometimes the last minute when you're actually going through the application. Because sometimes when you select maybe the major you're applying to or answer some other question within the application, another essay may actually appear. And we actually have all those documented within our system such that you're not going to necessarily miss one across all of the schools that you're applying to. So again, highly recommend doing that. That's a free resource that we have within our system. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by talking about how to develop content for your supplemental essays. And it's a very similar strategy to how we think about our content for the common application essay. So for those of you who are not as confident in the draft of the common application essay that you wrote, take special care and attention to the section because it might help you think through how to actually improve some of your content there, what you might want to be writing about, okay? If you don't have a draft of the Common App essay, I highly recommend going back and watching one of the other recorded webinars or one of the Facebook Lives that we've done that are posted in the Facebook group about how to get started on, or how to improve your Common Application essay. Okay, and we'll take questions as we go through, but I want to get through a first few pieces of content, and then we'll take a look at some questions that may have come in through the chat. So the first thing that we always want to do is it's like what we call instilling a certain mindset into your students, or for the students on the call, into you, right? Which is that the entire purpose of your application is to prove that you will be successful in college and beyond, okay? So what that means is that any essay that you write needs to help prove that you will be successful at that school and then after you graduate. And there's a few things kind of within that construct that, why is this important? They want to know that you, one, are actually going to graduate and do well in your classes. Number two is that you're going to contribute positively to the school's community in some way. That's pretty important for a lot of schools. It varies a little bit by school, but it's really quite important because they want students that are going to create this really nice community at the school, really help each other out, so that way everybody is successful. Number three is that you'll have a positive impact on whatever you choose to do in the future. And then number four is that this particular college will actually put you on a path towards achieving your goals in life, okay? Or help you kind of get there. Now, in practice, the question is, well, how do I actually prove that I'm going to be successful in college and beyond? That seems like a hard thing to do, and it kind of is, right? And so really, you've only had a certain, or your student has only had a certain number of experiences in their life to date that could potentially prove these things, but that really is what you need to talk about, is these experiences that you have. And ideally, these need to relate to what we call are these 5 traits that colleges are really looking for in their applicants. So as we're thinking through our content for what we're going to use for our supplemental essays, or maybe even for your Common App essay, what you want to do is you want to identify content that you can use related to these 5 traits. So I'm going to just talk about each of them really briefly. If you've attended one of these webinars before, this will be old hat to you, because we cover this on literally anything that we do to talk about essays, is we cover that these 5 traits are really critical. This is what colleges are looking for in students, and we want our experiences and what we write about in our essays to all tie to these. So at least one or more of these, okay? So the first is drive. These are students that are really on a path that always want to succeed, no matter how long the odds, no matter how difficult the situation. They're always just kind of overcoming challenges that are coming their way. So we want students that are driven. Second is intellectually curious students. These are students that like to learn just for the fun of it, oftentimes in their free time, just diving into a certain subject or topic to gain a deeper understanding of it. And this is one of the things that colleges love the most, because students that really love to learn, especially about what they might be majoring in or have something to do with their life goals, are going to be much more likely to be successful at school as well as after they graduate. The third is initiative. So these are for the entrepreneurs. So these are people that are not willing to accept the status quo and always thinking of ways to actually improve whatever they're working on or involved with, such as making their organizations better or improving ways of doing things. So students that take the initiatives are generally speaking, they're always seeking and finding these things that are problems, and they're always trying to like solve it, right? Or they're always thinking of ways to make stuff better. And once again, people that are like that are going to be more successful in college and life. So that's another trait that colleges like. The fourth is contribution. So these are students that no matter what group of people are around, whatever group of people they're a part of, whether or not there's their school community, their family, their classes, some other external community or activity, organizations, right, peer groups, they're making whoever they're with better as a result of their involvement and being there and the actions that they're taking. Right, so as we said, to be successful, one of the things that we're looking at is that they're going to have a positive contribution to the school's community and to the world. So students that have this contribution trait, you want to make sure that you're really proving that out and showing that in your essays. And then finally, the fifth one is diversity of experiences. So these are different life experiences that students have and different ways of thinking about the world. And what that's nice about that is they add unique perspectives to the student body. Students can therefore share that knowledge amongst each other, but also students with a diverse set of experiences often want to go and do a lot of different things, and therefore the school's alumni will have a broader impact on the world as a whole. If you can imagine that the school takes only people that want to go into finance, for example, that may not be entirely within their mission. So they're trying to get people that are kind of across a whole bunch of variety of different things. And so what we're going to do now is we're just going to cover a few different things. And this is like a very quick exercise that we're going to go through. So the first is, of the 5 traits that we just went through, I want each of you, for the students that are on this call, if you're a parent, guardian, what you want to do is just kind of identify these or help your student think through these. Which of these 5 traits, which 2 to 3 of these are your strengths? So that's number 1. Number 2 is I want you to think about your common application essay and figure out which of these traits, which of the 5 traits are actually showing through in your common application essay. And then the third is, because what we're going to want to do is we're going to basically in your supplements, we want to reinforce some of these traits as well as make sure that we're mentioning other traits that may not be covered in the common application essay. So number 3 is that we want to think through what are some of the experiences that we've had related to some of these traits, and we can talk about some brainstorming questions there. And then which of these experiences are like the most compelling, and then we're going to talk later about the initiative impacting growth test as we think about content for our supplements. But as you're all doing that and starting to think through some of this content, what we're going to do is I'm going to take some of the questions that may have popped in the chat. Okay, and for the slide presentation, I'll make sure that we get that over to Debbie to be able to share with you all. And then additionally, we have a question that's coming in around like the supplemental essay for like the Princeton supplements. We'll take some of those more specific questions at the end of this, because I think some of the content that we're going to cover here in terms of how to approach, working on a lot of these different supplemental essays, I think we'll get through that. But feel free to drop some questions in that might be more related to, some of the traits, some of the content, some of the topics that you might be thinking about writing about at this point in time. Instead, we'll probably spend another 30 seconds or so on this slide, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to talk about, 1, our approach to supplements. Number 2 is we'll actually talk about the what I call like the activity description essay, which is the most common type of supplement that you'll need to write, and how do we structure those, and how do we think about content for those. And then we're also going to talk about the YS essay later, or Y major essays, which is kind of some of the most common essays to write. All right. So now let's just talk broadly about our approach to supplemental essays, okay? So there's basically a couple of things here that we want to think through. So one of the exercises that we wanted to just go through that we started talking about is read through your common application and identify what traits are already being shown within that essay. Next is you have to think about, how do I continue to build upon those traits, or basically my like personality traits or your values that kind of come across in this. And there's 2 things to kind of think about. One is you want to reinforce some of these, your most important traits. So for example, if you really come across as being very driven in your common application essay, you may want to reinforce in your supplemental essays that you're a really driven person through other examples that are different than the common application essay examples, okay? Same with intellectual curiosity. If you have intellectual curiosity in your common application essay, you may want to reinforce that as a trait in some of your supplemental essays about being intellectually curious about something different than what you've covered in your common application essay. At the same time, what you want to do is you want to identify the traits that you did not cover particularly well in the common application essay, and you want to make sure that the traits that you have strengths within that aren't covered in that essay get covered within your supplemental essays, right? So the idea here is that the supplemental essays are kind of helping round out, right, the full picture of who you are, in addition to what content gets covered in the common application essay. Next is, for supplements, schools are looking for very specific pieces of content. That's why each school has a different set of supplemental essays. And as such, you want to make sure you're answering every single part of the prompt that they are asking. And we often find that students do not do this, right? So they're missing like one or two critical parts of what they're supposed to answer within the essay, and then those just go unanswered. And that's not what you want to do. So make sure that you are really reading the prompt, deeply understanding what you're supposed to be doing and what you're supposed to be saying within the essay, and make sure you're covering each element that they want you to cover. Third is, you need to be really direct. So a lot of these supplements are very short, and as I said, they're looking for very specific pieces of information about who you are, right? So they're not trying to measure creativity, and if you've been on some of our other webinars about the common application essay, they're not trying to measure creativity there either. But in general, because it's a longer essay, you're just going to be able to use more descriptive language. You're going to be able to use some more creativity and narrative and other things like that in the common application essay than you do in most supplemental essays. There are a few exceptions to this rule, such as the University of Chicago has a very creative supplemental essay. It's also fairly long, a bit more lengthy than like a typical 250 word or 150 word supplement that you might be writing. But the whole point here is you want to be really direct. You want to just come out and basically within the first 1 to 2 sentences of your essay, you want to answer the prompt and then use basically the rest of the essay as your supporting evidence, right? It's almost like you were writing, kind of like you were writing an essay for class to some degree, all right? The fourth is specificity. So a lot of students, because they're on a limited word count, end up speaking in generalities. And we'll see that in one of the examples that we're covering that we'll look at today, rather than like very precise anecdotes from your experiences that are very concise as well, all right? And your whole goal is to actually show your reader that you have these different traits, rather than just telling them that you get along well with other kids, for example. You want to actually be able to talk about a specific example of that. And maybe the impact that you had, okay? And this is a very critical thing to do, and it's also why, especially for these shorter essays, oftentimes it really helps to get really good feedback on these essays, because you're on a limited word count, you have a lot to say within that limited word count, and so you need somebody that can kind of help you think through how to be more concise with your language and with your content, without losing meaning. And then fifth is you want to focus on initiative, impact, and growth. These tend to be the most compelling themes. And what we mean by that is initiative is students are very, as we said, students are very entrepreneurial. So these are students that are, finding a problem or seeing something that can be improved and then improving it, okay? And then impact is the impact as a result from actually improving something, right? Taking the initiative, being entrepreneurial. And you want to usually use quantitative impact when you can, as well as qualitative impact. So such as like if you started a club or you became the president of the club, maybe you grew the membership, doubled the membership of that club, right? That is, your initiative is, I felt that we needed to add more members to this club to have a more positive impact on our school's community or something like that. And then, I went and grew the club, doubled the size of the club by doing X, Y, and Z, okay? And then finally, the last one is growth, which is more of like a time of personal growth, which your common application essay may be about, but you've probably had other times of personal growth in your life or experiences that you've gone through that have changed the way you look at yourself or look at the world. And those also make for really compelling themes for these types of essays. So the most common topics that you're going to have to write about in supplements are what we call like the describe an activity essay, which is basically, please briefly elaborate on one or more of your extracurricular activities or work experiences. It's the most common essay that schools have. And it's usually somewhere between 150 and 350 words, depending on the school. All right. So that's the most common one you'll need to write. Another one might be about leadership, where you've actually a situation where you have to take on a leadership role, either formal or informal. It could be community contributions or community service experience, where you've made a positive contribution to a community that you're a part of, such as your school, neighborhood, community group, etc. Intellectual curiosity, which might be one or more experiences where you find yourself actively engaged in the pursuit of additional knowledge, or something that is like just about your passions. Tell us something meaningful to you and why. Okay, so these are all the most common types of essays, and you can use a very, very similar approach to them. All right, and so basically we have three different options for structures. The first is what I call initiative and impact. So these are basically experiences where you took the initiative to do or accomplish something that would not have otherwise been done or done as well if you were not there. So there's an outcome that happened that you could actually describe quantitatively or qualitatively that generated some sort of positive impact. This is the best structure to write, and if you can, you want to do it, right? And so we already talked about an example of that, and we'll talk about another one on the next slide. Second is growth, as we talked about, which is personal growth. So you learned something about yourself or others as a result of participating in a certain activity or a group of work experiences, right? And then the third is what I call the descriptive approach, which is only used basically in like break glass type of scenario where you can't write very effectively about one of the two other approaches, which is basically like an activity that you just really enjoy, you find joy in, and you can actually describe the feeling that that activity provides. But you might struggle to actually be able to write about how you've changed as a result of doing this activity, or even like what you learned about yourself as a result of doing this activity. So this tends to be the less the less compelling of structure options, as I said, but it is something that you can do and still write a fairly compelling essay that won't be probably as compelling as something that's initiative and impact focused. But what we find is that the majority of students end up writing something that's more of a descriptive essay rather than an essay that's initiative, impact, or growth. So if you can, you want to focus more on these two up here. And so my favorite question to kind of think about as you're thinking about content for these types of essays and which traits it might be is to think about like your favorite organization that you're a part of that you didn't write about in your common application essay. And then think about what happens if you were never part of that organization? How would that organization be different? Because this will help you kind of frame in your mind, what did you do? What was the impact that you had on this organization? How did you make that organization better? And then you can actually write about that, okay? The impact that you had on the organization, whether or not that's bringing more members into the organization, raising more money for something, doing all sorts of or all manner of different things. Like that's kind of how you want to focus on this. And so like in terms of actually how do you write this essay? Now there's a lot of words here, right? But basically it follows like a fairly similar structure. And you want to, as I said, use a fairly direct approach. So you kind of summarize your story, like the big picture, like what happened, okay? So what's the activity? So the main focus of your essay, you're summarizing like what happened in 1 to 2 sentences. Oftentimes I try to say, for example, the first sentence may be, I was part of, I am passionate about speech and debate and, realized my team members were not, that we were not performing particularly well. And I worked with them and helped them to, improve their abilities and, it improved the entire team's outcome. And we, placed second at the state conference or something like that, right? So it's like very clearly at the beginning of the essay is just lay out like, here's what happened. Next is you're identifying the problem or the kind of the starting point in the essay. So what was the challenge that you were facing, right? We just talked about the challenge in this particular case in speech and debate is there were some team members that might have been underperforming, right? Then you can raise the stakes. So how did you actually help your readers kind of understand the obstacles you were facing? Like, why was this such a problem? Why was it not solved already, basically? Articulate your vision is like, what would the benefit be of solving this problem? So if you solve this problem, your whole team will do much better, for example. And then you can describe the actions that you took. So like, what did you specifically do to actually solve this problem? And then the skills and values that you had. So in other words, like what did you contribute to solving this problem? And how did you actually face this challenge and actually write about these different traits and skills? And then we talk about the impact of the actions and the effects that it had. And then described how, like at the end, above and beyond, describe how this activity has actually shaped the way you think, act, think, or solve problems in other areas of your life. Okay, it's a fairly simple structure, but it covers kind of all of the critical elements that you need to cover in one of these essays. As I said, this doesn't have to be the most creative essay in the entire world, but it will do, the trick. And the key point here is that they're really reading for just specific pieces of content that they're looking for, which really relate to those 5 critical traits. And they want to understand kind of like how that will prove that you're going to be successful in college and beyond, right? As I was saying, you try to use this direct approach to start your essay, answering the prompt in 1 to 2 sentences. And then at the end of the essay, one quick thing that I wanted to talk about there is that you don't really need a traditional conclusion, right? So if we jump back here, it's above and beyond, like how did this activity shape the way you act, think, or solve problems in other areas of your life? You're not summarizing or providing like a final sentence for the entire essay that kind of summarizes the whole thing. In reality, you can just kind of end it. Or you can just end it there. It's ending the thought. You can feel free to end relatively abruptly. That's completely fine. As long as you're covering all the content that's needed, you're on a relatively limited word count, so don't waste, an extra 7 to 10 words at the end of the essay, just writing like some throwaway sentence, basically. Okay, so we're gonna take a look at it, like an example of one of these essays. And then I'll take a couple of questions first. So a question, how would you add to the diversity of the university? So that's like a very useful question. And what it amounts to is you can take a couple of different approaches to that. One is you can actually look and do some research actually on the university and understand kind of the diversity of the university as it currently stands and the student body. Then think through kind of like, how do you fit in within that in terms of your own background and your own experiences and what your interests are in, okay? So maybe you have different interests than other students at the university, right? Maybe you're thinking of having different career goals than other people at the university. Maybe you, have certain activities or things that you enjoy doing that might be different than other people at the university, right? So diversity can mean a lot of different things, right? It's sometimes like it's diversity of thought. Sometimes it's diversity of background. Sometimes it's diversity of interests. Sometimes it's diversity of future career goals, okay? So what I like to do in that case is actually, I always say, like, you want to really research the school and have a deep understanding of like, what does diversity actually even mean to them? And how do they even think about that? Sometimes that's in their mission statements or other things like that. And like, who are the types of students that already are going there? And then how do they actually fit in? How does your student fit in? Are there certain organizations that they would be naturally a part of, right? Based off their interests or backgrounds or culture or whatever it is. And you can then tie that in to the particular school. You want to be as specific, like you want to be a bit specific if you can, and tie it to actual things at the school, because sometimes this is an essay that's almost like a why are you applying to the school essay in disguise in some cases. So what type of essay would you classify as? Tell us about your academic and personal achievements. Is this a personal statement? So the common application essay is more of a personal statement. All right. Now, what you're saying here about tell us about your academic and personal achievements can also be a personal statement, but if it's alongside of the common application essay, you may treat it a little bit differently. And what I would focus on is really the problem with this type of essay is that's all the prompt is that what students do is they give you a laundry list of all of their academic and personal achievements. And that's actually not that interesting. And the interesting part is to select 2 or 3 really of like the biggest, most proudest achievements that you've had, and then walk me through how you like got there, right? Because the journey of how you obtain those achievements is way more powerful than just achieving something. So maybe you ended up, getting 2nd place at like a science Olympiad competition somewhere in some event. Well, it probably took a lot of hard work, skill building, maybe challenges to overcome to actually get to the point where you had that success. And to me, that's the more interesting part of the overall story. And that's actually the more interesting part to the admissions officers, because that actually gives you a sense of, how does the student act? Like, how driven are they? How intellectually curious are they? You don't want to come across as being the student that just is naturally gifted at math, so they won the math competition because they're naturally gifted and they never try. Or like, the athlete that's just naturally gifted and never really tries, right? You want to be the person that's putting forth significant effort, both inside and outside of class, inside practice, outside of practice, all of that sort of stuff. Right. So it's really, as I said, it's really about the journey, and then picking like what are the biggest, most like the achievements that you're the most proud of, and talking about the journey to getting there and achieving those. Right. So we're going to take a look at a quick example essay, and then we will drop in and talk about YS essays and look at an example there to round things out for the evening. Okay. And so this is like a very common like first draft of an essay that we see, as well as an essay that a lot of students actually submit as part of their applications. So you see a question like this. Please tell us how you have spent the last 2 summers or vacations between school years, including any jobs you have held. 250 words. I'm going to read this out loud. And we're going to talk about how to improve it. Last year, I worked as a junior camp counselor at a sleepaway camp. I was placed in a tent with a group of girls ages 10 and 11 who were constantly homesick and going through awkward phases. As their counselor, I learned how to console them when they were homesick and even be a friend to them. I also instructed soccer, which I knew how to do because I play on my school's soccer team. However, I also learned how to teach sports I had never played before, such as ultimate frisbee. This past summer, I volunteered at a local hospital in Manhattan. My job was to escort patients to their room and carefully check their wristbands. I also helped organize the medical papers and wills. While at the hospital, I learned every detail matters. One mistake in the spelling of someone's name and you could give medication to the wrong patient. I also got an introduction to the hospital environment with all the faculty working together. Okay, so the first thing that I always do after I read any essay is ask myself, what did I learn about this student? That's question number 1. And then question number 2 is, which of the pieces of content, like if I was to highlight them, are the most compelling to me? So just drop into the chat if you have a description of what you learned about this student after reading this, as well as like, is there any of this content that actually really jumped out to you? We had a question come in and like, why do you want to go to our school essay? That's what we're covering next. Right, so I see not everybody's dropped in some nice comments yet. about this particular essay, but so this is a really common essay that we see. And the issue with this essay is that it's not following an initiative and impact framework. It's not following a growth framework. Because initiative impact, I'm not really seeing what she did that was entrepreneurial or above and beyond what was expected of her. I also don't see the impact of what she did. For growth, I'm not really seeing how these experiences really changed her view of the world in a meaningful way, or her view of herself. And it's more of like just like a descriptive essay of like, here's actually what I did, right? Now, so you see this prompt that says literally like, what did you do your last 2 summers? And this student is answering it very literally. The problem with that is that so many of these things are actually not that interesting or compelling. So the only things that really, like, we just kind of go through point by point because it's a very short essay. So, you know, I need to know, like, okay, what was the situation? I worked as a camp counselor at sleepaway camp, so you kind of have to include that. Placed with a group of 10 to 11 girls who were homesick. That's potentially interesting. I don't really need to know that they're going through awkward phases. As a counselor, I learned how to console them, or even when they're homesick, or even be a friend. So the consoling part, that's potentially somewhat interesting. But then I get into, I also instructed soccer, which I knew how to play, right? That's not very interesting. And then also teaching a sport they never played before, ultimate frisbee. This isn't like particularly competitive. Probably took relatively little overall effort to learn how to play ultimate frisbee and then teach other people how to play it. These 2 sentences really do nothing for me. And this sentence does not tell me enough information. So learning how to console them when they were homesick or even be a friend to them is, well, that's nice that you consoled them, but how did you do that? Did you solve this problem? Were they homesick by the time that they left this camp? Were they still homesick? You know, what did you do that was unique, right, to actually solve this problem or get students to be less homesick, or to console them, or to chat with them? Maybe what you did was you found somebody that was kind of a little bit reclusive and on the outside. You talked to her, and you know, you engaged some other students to actually get this person to be part of the group. She was then excited. Everybody got along great, and you know, problem solved. Nobody was homesick, right? I want to know, what actions did you take to actually resolve this problem for this student? And that is really critical here. So the key part of these types of essays is get rid of the content that doesn't really matter and expand and really focus on the content that is actually the most interesting. And that's what we're doing kind of like all day long, right? All of our writing coaches is really identifying what is actually compelling about an essay. How do we expand upon that to make that even more compelling? And then what content is less compelling that it could potentially be getting rid of. And the same situation goes in this volunteer at a hospital in Manhattan. So many students focus on responsibilities, such as escorting patients or organizing medical papers and wills. What they're not focused on is, if you weren't there, how would this have been different? So in other words, what did only you uniquely bring to the table or do? So maybe you're talking about, well, you mentioned organizing medical papers and wills. Were they not organized before? Did you implement or devise a new system for organizing these in a much better way? Was this something that would not have happened if you weren't there? Right? And so just kind of expanding on that could be a lot more compelling. Just learning about details mattering, or somebody's name, giving the wrong medication. These are things that you're telling me that you say that you learned, but I'm not really seeing that in terms of your own experience. All right. So you say that you're saying that the hospital environment with the faculty working together, but guess what? Show me, like, prove to me that you actually like worked with other faculty, and then talk to me about how you solved the problem, maybe by working together with other faculty, and the impact that that had on you. That could be much more compelling versus kind of this high level cursory type stuff and evidence that we're using because we're trying to fit everything in versus just focusing on the stuff that matters and the impact that it had. Right. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to take a look at some of the comments. We can take some questions about this type of essay. If not, we'll end up moving on to the why us essay and wrap up. She definitely didn't seem very excited about her experience. I see that from Debbie Warrior. Did you make a mistake on someone's name? Yeah, I kind of got that sense too. Also, probably if that happened, you probably don't want to write about that part. Unless maybe that she caught it, that somebody else, maybe she caught it for somebody else, right? So a lot of times we're thinking through like, what are these different situations that could have happened? And if they did happen, writing about it would make the essay significantly more compelling. And when we come up with those situations, then it gets students' minds thinking of like, oh, what actually did I do? What other situations did come up that are similar? And we end up finding that that leads to much more compelling content, because most students don't just like go do something and just do like the base minimum. You know, there's something usually pretty compelling that most students can write about. All right, any other questions about this type of essay? As I said, really common type of essay where you're just kind of describing an experience that you've had, particularly with an activity or a work experience, and really focusing on like what you did, the impact that it had, how you've grown, that sort of thing. And we can take a few questions at the end, and I'm going to move on to pull up the why essay content now. Okay, so we're talking about the why us and the why major essays. So first of all, like, why do they exist? So the why us essay is all about what we call demonstrated interest in the admissions world. So they exist solely because it's kind of like what we call an enrollment management technique. So schools want to know, generally speaking, if you let the student into the school, or your student into the school, that the student will attend the school. The students are applying to so many different schools these days, getting into a number of different schools and then turning a number of them down. And ideally, especially for smaller schools or liberal arts schools or many of the private schools, what they're trying to do is, especially with these early decision deadlines, is they're trying to get at least a portion of their class filled, so then they know how many additional slots they need to fill in regular decision. And that's really important to each of these schools to make sure that they're hitting about the right target in terms of number of students that they're looking for. And what demonstrated interest does is, and you're explaining why do you want to attend this school, is it provides a very clear picture of, one, how much does a student actually understand about this school? So in other words, that the student has done a good amount of research into the school. And number two is that the student is a good fit for the school and that the school is a good fit for the student. That's what this essay is trying to prove. And we're going to talk about how to do that. And it's going to take multiple hours of research for each of these essays that you need to write. And it's very critical that students do this. Because I'll talk about like what students do that don't do this, and the answer is generally your probability of getting into school is much, much, much lower. Okay. One counselor that's a good friend of mine always refers to this, like, think of the YSSA as a love letter. Like, you're writing a love letter to this school. Like, why do you love this school? Like, why do you want to go to this school? You know, that sort of thing. Almost like you're writing it to your future love, or, you know, something like that. The Y major essay is oftentimes fairly similar to the YSSA, although it sometimes includes more of what we call an intellectual journey, which is kind of identifying like your own experiences that the student has had and how they relate to the major that they want to go and do. Because then it proves that, okay, the student's actually really interested in doing this major because they've done other things in the past related to it. And that's kind of how the Y major approach is. But oftentimes those get kind of combined together, and it's like, well, why do you want to do this major at this school? And so the general approach to this is you need to do some research. The first thing that I recommend doing is filling out a questionnaire that basically outlines very simply, here's what I'm looking for academically in a school. So you're not even looking at a specific school at this point, but you're just saying, here's what I'm looking for academically. right? What majors do I want to go do? What are my kind of interests within those majors? So if I'm doing computer science, maybe I'm interested in machine learning or AI or natural language processing or, web development or, whatever it is. We want to know is like, here's what I'm really interested academically, both within a major and maybe even outside of a major. Maybe you want to take Chinese or other things like that, right? Then you also want to, in your questionnaire, you're going to fill out your non-academic interests. So what are the types of activities or other experiences that you want to do while you're in school? And for both of these, which are the two most critical pieces, when you go and research the school, then you're going to want to see how the school's academic offerings match up with your academic interests, and how the school's non-academic offerings actually match up with your non-academic interests in the activities and other things like that that you want to accomplish while you're in school. There's some other optional categories, such as if you have certain deeply held values as a student, you might want to actually match those to the school's mission. Second is, you might have certain personality traits or values that you hold, and maybe those match really well with the school's culture. Maybe you've actually gone and visited the school and you just felt at home there in some way, shape, or form, or you met other students that you felt like had a very similar mindset or way of thinking about the world to yourself, that you fit in really well from like a cultural perspective, that you just feel like you're a good fit. Maybe you have certain ways that you've discovered that you learn really well, and that matches with how the school teaches. Maybe the school has a very unique way of teaching or a unique way of, is a unique way of teaching that's different than other schools. Otherwise, you can think about like how to contribute to the school's community as well. And maybe that sometimes needs to be included within the overall essay context. And so all of these kind of together, what you really want to do is you want to really get detailed. So in the case of academic interest, we'll actually take a look at an example essay here. But oftentimes, you want to take a look at, well, if you're planning on being interested in computer science and you are interested in machine learning, you're going to look up specific classes that the school offers on machine learning, even looking at the syllabus of those classes and seeing certain topics that are being covered. Two is you're going to actually look at the professors that are involved in that particular subject at the school, and maybe even what research they do. And then does that research like tie to stuff that you're interested in? And does the school actually offer opportunities to actually engage with research with the, engage in research with the people, with these professors? And maybe that's one of the reasons that you want to go to the school. So there's a lot of research that actually just needs to get done. By like mentoring specific classes, mentioning professors' names within these schools can actually do a really good job of proving that you've actually done your research and that you understand that this school is a good fit for you and this and the school, and you are a good fit for the school. Okay. In terms of the structure, this is very simple. Basically, at the beginning of this essay, use a really direct approach, and in 1 to 2 sentences, it's almost like a thesis statement. You just say, at a high level, this is why I want to attend the school, right? It has the academic, and it matches my academic interests in this way, and it matches what other things that I want to accomplish in these other ways. And I feel like I will be able to build these schools and then, these skills to go and do this, after I graduate, right? Just full, like easy, simple introduction. The first section of the essay is you focus on academic interests. You say, here's what I am interested in academically, and then how does what the school actually offer match with my academic interests? And in particular, you want to focus on the things that only this school may uniquely be able to offer, maybe even compared to some of the other more generic, other schools that you're applying to. Like, so what makes this school unique? In section 2, you cover your non-academic interests and some of the other reasons that you might have for being a good fit for the school, such as school culture and other things like that. And then the conclusion, you may not even need a traditional conclusion for a very short essay. However, if you're writing like a bit longer of a YS essay, my 500-word ones, such as like what the University of Michigan used to have, you kind of want to reiterate your reasons for why you're a good fit for the school and a good school is a good fit for you, and wrap up the end of the essay. Once again, not particularly creative. You just need to cover the content that needs to be covered. You need to basically just prove that you're really interested in attending the school, that you're a good fit for the school is a good fit for you. Demonstrate interest in the school, so that way they know that if they accept you, you're very likely to attend the school. As such, these essays, it's really hard to write a generic essay that applies across multiple schools. And if you do, you're probably not doing it right. Okay, you can use elements of these essays for each school that you might have like 3 or 4 of these to write, but each of them should be fairly unique in order to be successful here. For the Y major essays, you're using a very similar approach to the YS essay, and you need to really read the prompt very carefully, as you might need to focus more on your academic interest than non-academic interests. Some of these schools will actually have 2 essays. One is Y major, one is YS. And for the Y major essay, you want to really focus on the story behind your experiences that relate to why you want to do this particular major. Okay, so let me just check, see, it doesn't look like any additional questions have come in. Oh, no, we got one here. Would you consider the YS essay easier than the personal statement? So the answer to that is yes, I would, because like it's fairly formulaic, right? It's like a fairly formulaic essay. You can go and do the research on it, and you don't have to be overly creative. You don't have to be, focus on storytelling and really understanding like what's compelling and what's not compelling. You're just kind of outlining like, here's what I'm really interested in and why. And then this is how this matches up with what the school offers. It's like a fairly simple overall approach. The beginning of the essay, you don't really have to worry much about your introduction because you're just going to be really straightforward. But this essay does often take more time to write than a personal statement essay may take, just because of the level of research that you may need to do. All right. So we're going to take a look at least the first part of a quick example essay. It's a bit longer, but the reason why I like to show this essay is, one is it's very not well structured, but 2 is the student clearly did their research on a school. So you'll get a sense of this is the level or type of research that you want to do into the school. Okay. And as I said, it's not the best written essay that we'll see because it's the first draft of an essay, but we can talk about like how to make it better. And then we will wrap up with any final questions that we have. So this is a Y Michigan essay, which was 500 words. The student is currently actually at the University of Michigan. She got into a bunch of really awesome schools, and she's in like a very prestigious program there. Okay, so describe the unique qualities that attract you to the specific undergraduate college or school, including preferred admission or dual degrees programs to which you are applying at the University of Michigan. How did that curriculum support your interests? So why are some people resistant to HIV? They have a mutation that lacks CCR5 molecules. Why do some people collapse after eating bananas? They lack an enzyme that digests potassium. These diseases from my anatomy textbook have intrigued me even more after I attended my 6th physics lecture on mechanobiology presented by Professor Alan Liu at the University of Michigan. I was very interested when he said that metastatic cells are softer than normal cells, so cancer can be identified by cell surface. As the team leader of homeopathiophysiology, I teach people about diseases, but I want to research the diseases that do not have an apparent cause or cure. I can research these issues deeper in biomedical sciences at the traditional undergraduate research opportunity program, a program designed for students seeking their first research experience. I want to research mutations in viral proteins in projects like the role of HTLV1 tax in the development of leukemia or Artemis, human disease gene and DNA repair process. I can also discuss these questions in an intimate first-year seminar in biology with only 18 people where I can intensely learn about the topic. I hope to become a doctor specializing in pathology, and the College of Literature, Arts, and Sciences is my next step. LSA emphasizes the arts along with literature and science and produces well-disciplined graduates who look at the world through a prism instead of a single lens. It even encouraged connecting science to art in the sciences as art context. I loved one of the pieces in which 2 shoes were portrayed as lungs healthy and cigarette affected, and it showed a stark contrast. With over 2,000 classes in 75 departments, I can explore different disciplines like psychology, Chinese, and Spanish while still receiving a major in cellular and molecular biology. There are many classes I am interested in taking, like Biology 118, AIDS and other health crises that study the interrelationship between health and disease in society and social structure. This class could help me research potential risk factors for diseases and find better preventative measures and treatments. Another class, Health, Biology, and Society, What is Cancer, will give me a holistic understanding on health and society and find ways to fight cancer. I want to take plants in human health because plants provide human food and medicine, and I want to research the important role they play in human health and how medicines can be improved for a better treatment. I will also minor in psychology, Chinese, or Spanish. I'm very interested in Professor Susan Murphy's research in precision medicine, where she treats chronic and relapsing diseases by finding the best therapeutic approach based on the patient's stage of disease and patient's response to prior treatments. This helps maximize treatment efficacy by providing increased treatment levels without side effects from overtreatment. She works in the LSA Department of Chemistry along with Professor Robert T. Kennedy, who teaches analytical chemistry. He has done research on measuring important biological molecules in body fluids and how they contribute to nervous endocrine diseases like diabetes. I want to take biomedical analytical chemistry in laboratory courses and interpret levels of physiological species in blood and urine. The LSA Opportunity Hub will help me find internships and prepare me for my future career in medicine. As an LSA student, I can join LSA-only Michigan learning communities where I can build close relationships with the other students and faculty who share the same interests as me. I want to join LSA Honors where I can learn in a more rigorous curriculum and deeply research my senior year thesis on a disease. Because of the smaller class sizes, I can build deep connections with motivated faculty and students at different disciplines. Also, I have access to honors-only opportunities like the pre-med roundup with exploration of patient and clinical exposure. I'm excited for honors core in biology, a class where I can relate biology to real-world problems like GMOs. Health science scholars, a close-knit community that teaches health issues and health professions, is another MLC I am interested in. Global Scholars Program is where I engage with U.S. international exchange students from 40 countries. I love tutoring ESL students at my school and learning more about their cultures. I love expressing my views on important issues like global hunger and listening to other people's thoughts. Global Scholars will allow me to mirror that. They work with international governments, and their most recent project is working with the government to bring together disabled and non-disabled students. I want to be part of this global impact. University of Michigan College of Literature, Arts, and Sciences is the best fit for me, and I hope to join the Wolverine community next year. All right. Whew, that's a lot. And what is just like, I think the key point here, and we'll talk about what's interesting and what's not interesting so you can actually think about reducing content in this essay. But this student, it's very clear that she did her research. She has plenty of content to write about that relate her interests and what she wants to do with very specific, unique programs at this university, right? So she's talking about like the pre-med roundup, right? She's talking about this Global Scholars Program. She's talking about, being in like the honors core, LSA honors program. So she's naming very specific programs that have limited numbers of students within them, that, she may even need to be accepted specifically into these programs. And she's explaining why, and she's not doing a great job of this yet, but why she belongs in those programs based off of her interests and what she's looking to accomplish. Okay, so that is really compelling. Now, some of the other things that are great, but like number one is like, this is not a particularly good introduction. I like the idea that, she has like diseases that have intrigued her from a long time in the anatomy textbook. I like the fact that she talks about attending a physics lecture actually at Michigan, right? And what she learned there. But there's a bunch of other stuff here that is like a little bit less important. And what she really needs to do is add more structure to her essay where she can clearly identify, okay, I want to go to Michigan because, number one, I'm really interested in doing research on diseases, and Michigan has a lot of professors doing research on diseases that I'm really interested in, right? That's like reason number one to go. Reason number two is that she has interest outside of that, where she might want to do Spanish or Chinese or something else that she can take alongside and minor in and kind of build out her other academic interests. And point number three is she wants to do this Global Scholars type program where she's kind of, or LSA honors program, where she's like, has interests like in kind of the global view of the world and maybe global diseases and the effects that she can maybe have on them. And that's why she belongs in that, right? And she needs to just like clearly state that within the introduction. It could be, 1, 2, or 3 sentences to be able to do that, and then kind of, systematically paragraph by paragraph, section or section by section, just go through and kind of highlight, okay, like I'm very interested, a topic sentence that would say, I'm interested in doing undergraduate research programs, and here's why. I'm interested in becoming this type of doctor. I'm interested in studying these particular diseases, and here's why. And she can even talk about some of the experiences that she's had and then tie that to specific things that are happening at this school. Some of the stuff that's a little bit less compelling is such as first year seminar in biology with only 18 people. Number one is you generally don't want to talk about first year classes because they're the same at a lot of different schools. Number two is like the class size, unless that really, really, really is important to you, is just like less overall importance because they know what their class sizes are. And you need to tie it more to how you might really learn well in smaller group sizes in order to actually prove that to be successful. You also don't want to talk about like over 2,000 classes in 75 departments. They know that already. Like they already know that. So like, why are you going to actually mention that? So many students in these essays are saying, I'm applying to this particular school. I'm applying to, say, University of Chicago because it's a top-ranked school, right? It has great, award-winning faculty. It's so generic, anybody could write it. That's not what you want to do. That's not demonstrating interest. You can literally apply that to almost any school that you're applying to. What you want to do is you want to actually tie this to very specific things at that school and the reasons that you want to attend it, right? You don't want to say, I want to go to New York University because it's in New York. Well, maybe you do want to go there because it's in New York, but that's not what you want to say. But maybe New York as a location, because you want to go into marketing and that's the center of marketing, it provides you with more opportunity to actually get internships and other things like that during the school year, as well as during the summers, and have like a more broader opportunity to engage with that particular community. Then you can make more of an argument about location. Writing about intramural sports is something that you want to do. That's not that interesting because every school has it, right? Writing about attending the football games or the basketball games, not that interesting, right? That's not why you're supposedly going to school. That's a fun thing to do, right? So these are the types of things that there's a lot of topics that you may not want to write about. That's why you're focused really on academics and some of the non-academic stuff that really is more focused on building your skills or furthering your overall interests than anything else, okay? So I'm going to pause there. And we have one here, just started 3 major reasons and then body paragraphs in detail on those 3. Yep, that's exactly it, right? We're using a very simple like structure that you probably learned in like 5th or 6th grade for this, right? Because guess what? That really works. And all we really care about is the content. We don't care about how beautiful this writing is, anything like that. We just want to have a very clear understanding that the school is a good fit for the student and the student is a good fit for school. Right, any other final questions that are coming in? As we said before at the beginning of this, what you should do is for anybody who's creating a new account with Prompt and you haven't used any of our essay reviews yet, at prompt.com/roadtocollege, go there, click the Get Started button or the Create Your Account button. You'll create an account, and anybody that does that by the end of day tomorrow, we're going to raffle off. Basically, we're going to randomly select 3 students to receive 1 free essay review credit that you can experience the feedback that our team is able to provide. You got a little bit of a flavor of that tonight when we went through these couple of essays. However, we go into a lot more depth. For example, the first draft of a common application essay, we will spend 45 minutes providing really detailed feedback on how to improve the content and structure and clarity of the writing, and you'll get an action plan for how to actually execute on that. And no matter kind of how far along in the essay you are, whether or not you think it's done already, it's still really useful to get a review because what you're trying to do is build confidence in your essay, but you're also just trying to find like further improvements that can be made and make your essay significantly more compelling because chances are your students are applying to schools that they're self-selecting into the schools they're applying to, so the other applicants are going to have very similar GPAs and test scores and like also like robust activities lists and other things like that as the other schools that are other students that are applying to the school. And essays are one of the few last things that you can actually control that can set the student apart in the process. Okay. All right. So let me just I'll stick around for a few more minutes, take any final questions. And said, make sure you take advantage of creating your account, getting that free, you know, putting your hat into the ring to get those free essay reviews. It's like one of the most valuable things you can do as part of your application. As we always say, you know, think about, you know, how your student might have prepared for like the SAT or the ACT exams. Maybe you use some sort of outside resource potentially for that, or classes, or got a tutor, or other things like that. The same type of thing for, you know, way to look at essay support.
Hey, Brad, what's the cost of getting a supplemental essay reviewed versus a regular one?
Depends on the length. So like 1 credit is $75, and you can get them less expensive than if you buy multiple credits. Sometimes we run discounts, but we're not over the next week because it's our busiest week of the year. And the supplemental essays, so if it's a 250-word supplement, it only might be a half of a credit to use. If it's a 350-word supplement, it might be 3/4 of a credit to use. So it's 500 plus words is 1 credit. So it's based off of kind of the length of the essay prompt that is writing. However, you should not worry about the word count that you're writing. So this student that we looked at, their YS essay is 300 words longer than it needs to be right now. But by providing us with more content than less, it's much easier to cut content than to add content in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it doesn't really matter on the length of your essay. We just go on like the essay prompt length, and that's kind of how we price it out. And that's all within our system. As I said, one of the other benefits by creating your free account is you get a list of all the supplemental essays that you're going to need to write, and just that in itself is really valuable to make sure you're not missing any essays that maybe
that's actually very valuable. As we were talking at the beginning, that sometimes kids realize at the very last minute that they missed an essay, you know, that was related to a particular.
Yeah, and then they're like scrambling like 5 minutes before the deadline. You know, it happens. You see it pretty frequently, actually. All right. Well, very good. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And if you have any questions just about also like your student in general, you can just call us, like by calling this number, which is the 844-577-6678 number. That actually like is like a direct line to like our writing coaching team. And so you can actually talk with one of our writing coaches, and we can, if you have like a question just like about, is my topic good or not, that I'm writing about, you can just call us and ask. If you have questions about what do I need from the prompt service to actually help my student or anything like that, feel free to just call us. We get a lot of parents that just call and just want to chat with us, and that's perfectly fine. All right. Well, very good. Thank you all very much. This is fun.
Bye.
Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.